We got another question, a really fun one, one that I think Colonel and I are really well positioned to answer. But Positron asks, if you had a 1998 PC with you in a remote hut, which game would you take with you? Would you do anything else other than turn on a computer in a remote hut after gaming as a job for years? Uh, this is rough because
Googling
1998 is like one
1998
of the
PC game.
Oh, I know exactly what
yeah.
games I would have.
Yeah, I was gonna say Colonel. I feel like I know what games Colonel's gonna pick.
Yeah, so it depends on what part of 1998. Well, it's not about 1998 games. It's games that can be played on that kind of computer.
Sure.
And
Yes.
and so if I can go first, basically that's the I started playing computer games at around that time, maybe 97 a little, but properly 98 on my cousin's computer. He had a Pentium 3, I think, at the time,
Yeah, it
and
would be 2 or 3.
and a Riva TNT2, I think, the graphics card
Oh,
that he
wow.
upgraded and stuff.
Bro, I bet you only had like fucking 128 megabytes of RAM. What a fucking
Yes.
That would be a
What a
lot
bore.
back then. That would have
What
been
a
a
bore,
crazy
dude.
gaming computer.
He had 120
Come on, man. You needed at
think.
least 256 to play EverQuest in like 2000.
No,
'cause it had-
256 is Pentium 4 time. No,
Yeah,
Pentium 3.
that's like 2004 RAM.
Yeah.
Nah.
I mean, my first computer had 512 megabytes. It was a Nathlon XP 2600
Oh, wow.
plus, 2.03 gigahertz. Let's go. No,
Insane.
but let's not. No, we're talking games here.
Yep.
Yeah, the answer is very easy because it's just the games that I played at the time that I know work and I have nostalgia and love for, which would be Fallout 1 and 2, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, StarCraft, GTA 1 and 2, more GTA 2, Crazy Taxi. Oddly enough, that game was fun. I spent so long, so
Was
so
Crazy
many
Taxi
hours.
on PC?
Yeah. Oh, at that time. Well, we're not talking. Yeah, we're just not talking. I'm talking like games that the computer can play, not necessarily at the time, because Fallout 2 only came out late to 98, and StarCraft, the expansion, also came out in 98, I think. Then Diablo, and I would perhaps the most important one, because it's actually difficult to play these days, The Sims 1.
Oh yeah, The Sims 1 is it would be a big
Sims
one.
1?
It would be.
Yeah.
I was just.
I wouldn't. Yeah, but I wouldn't play The Sims 1 without mods. There's no way.
I
I'd
never
be
played
playing,
with
like
mods.
vanilla.
I just had the
vanilla.
expansions.
What, dude?
I
The
never
mods
played
for
with
Sims 1 were
just
the
the expansions.
best. Vanilla Sims
I'm
is
sure.
so bad.
I just didn't have
Like-
internet. I could barely do the expansions, let alone
There were so
everything
many
else.
furniture mods for Sims 1. It was insane.
yeah,
I remember going on like these weird ass websites and being
Yeah,
and they're
Mod the
just, like,
Sims. Mod the Sims.
yeah, there's like here's like 15 different furniture packs that like
Yep.
they're free. Here you go, enjoy them. And you're like, oh, these are amazing furnitures. It's just what a
Yeah.
weird time.
I think my
Sims 1
first
was
real
incredible.
PC game was Age of Empires 2, which didn't come out until 1999. So
You would
1998,
still be
me
able to
only
play it.
really knew about that weird Jurassic Park demo disc thing. You know what I mean? Where you
I
like
know what you're talking about.
the one where
yeah.
you like went through like a museum and then like a Jeep section and then a part where a running T-Rex demo video turned into a skeleton with googly eyes. Like that entire video, like that entire game thing, which I think you can find in a browser site somewhere now. Did I do a Let's Try of that? I thought about it because I tracked it down on
think
like an
it's probably
archive
on the
site
Internet
somewhere. And
Archive.
I was just very amused by it.
Yeah.
That was a weirdly terrifying game for a child. It was just so it was like old uncanny graphics crossed with a lot of other creepy ideas. Like it was just the game was really unnerving, and going back to it still is weird to me. Although I also remember playing. I played like Myst for like 5 minutes, and it was incomprehensible to me on my grandma's computer
Yeah,
once,
same here.
and that also scared me. It was just
Yeah,
scary.
Mist had a really weird atmosphere as a child who knew nothing about the world or video games.
Yeah,
Because it is so alien.
A lot of PC games had like an uncanny aesthetic to them that was really unnerving as a kid when you were used to looking at like
Creepily
Nintendo
still and
64
quiet.
games. Yeah.
I
Did not
think
like them.
if I had to pick something from back then, if I had to pick just from 1998, like there are obvious like big ones like Fallout 2, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, moving forward to stuff that like could be played on a system like that, like Planescape Torment would be one that I would like to keep. But honestly, around that time, 1998 was such a huge, like historically important year for video games. Truly, so many incredible video games came out in 1998.
Yeah.
My favorite JRPG of all time came out in 1998. That's Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Sega Saturn. Tons of really important fighting games came out just like right around that time. I think Third Strike was 1999. Darkstalkers 3, Vampire Savior came out in 1998. So like the question of if
Metal
I only
Gear
had a 1998 Metal Gear Solid, exactly, Ocarina of Time.
The first one came out in 98?
Banjo-Kazooie,
Wow.
Yep.
StarCraft.
Yep, the first
Grim
Solid came out in
Fandango.
1998.
Thief.
Yeah, but these are
Baldur's
all
Gate.
games on a PC though. These are all games that you can't have on a
Yeah,
PC.
So
That's the
Baldur's Gate
problem.
then.
Yeah,
Baldur's
Yeah.
Gate you could have on a PC for sure. But
Half-Life
but
as
yeah,
well.
that's I think the issue is like making the choice between PC games really limits it.
Yeah.
There wasn't much.
Yeah.
It also depends on if I have people there, right? Like, does this PC have an internet connection? If so, like, like I could spend a lot of time playing Half-Life Deathmatch or like Team Fortress 2 or something, or
God.
Team Fortress.
Yeah,
But then,
PC,
like,
the time
PC
you'd-
players at
you'd-
least have Half-Life, StarCraft, and Fallout 2, and Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, like, if you look at like, well, I mean, another opportunity is like,
Turok
if this is
2.
just 1998 anything, like, fuck that. I'm getting a Darkstalkers cab, and if I have someone else there with me, we're playing Darkstalkers till the end of days. Like, fighting games could last you forever. So it just
Yeah.
depends on what the circumstances are. But that would be my pick, is probably any of the great PC RPGs that came out at the time, just as well because of their depth and their replayability.
The depth is surprisingly shallow though, so I think particularly more
Sure.
for Baldur's Gate than for Fallout.
Yeah.
But
1998 video games. Let me pick one that I probably would like a lot.
but like multiplayer is tricky because that's where things have evolved the most. Like for example, Half-Life 2. Like if you go play the original Counter-Strike, or I think in 98 it might have been only Day of Defeat or something like that. It's bad. It's a bad time. It's a really bad time. Like I think, or Unreal Tournament, the original one, they're fun for a little while, but then like you're used to so much better.
Okay, so I would for sure.
Fighting games are different, though, I
Have
think.
I would have Hot Wheels Stunt Track Driver. It's a great one. Pretty good experience there. Let me see. What else do I have here? I would probably also have Genome. I think Genome was really dumb. I think that was 98, right? What was that? Genome
I
was
didn't
96.
constrain
So
myself to
Genome would be
98.
there. Well, I'm thinking of not stuff that's past 98. I'm thinking of anything
Right.
that's 98 and before, which isn't a lot, but Roller Coaster Tycoon is 99. Very close. I would have had Roller Coaster as well. Stunt Challenge. No,
I'm not
that's
looking at
99.
lists. I probably should.
There's not a lot of games. I'm trying to think of like when I was younger, I spent a lot of time doing management sims. I don't know why. I thought I was going to be like a
Good.
CEO of like literally every single field of fucking business. Like I have every sim game. I have Sim City, I have Sim Isle, Sim Safari, Sim Streets of Sim City, Sim Copper, Sim Tower, Sim City Classic,
Wow.
Ski Resort Tycoon, Fast Food Tycoon, Zoo Tycoon, Mall Tycoon. Like like what the fuck? What was I gonna be? I was gonna be like a fucking business owner for an entire country? Like what is this? I don't know why I own every single simulation game. I
You
think my
missed your
parents just
calling.
hoped that I guess I miss my calling. I do feel really indignant when I see things poorly run because I feel like I could probably do it better just with a lot of
we know.
yeah. So that's where that came from. It's because I literally was really good at every single sim game on the planet. So I have an indignant CEO attitude towards everything. I would probably
Gives you more life skills than most actual edutainment games.
That's probably true. You're like I think
I used to
Roller
freak
Coaster
out my
Tycoon is-
elementary school teachers by being able to pronounce like Tenochtitlan and stuff and knowing about things because of Age of Empires.
Yeah.
I had the. Oh, Diablo. I would have Diablo. Diablo was out in '98.
Diablo
yeah,
1
that
though.
could be
Diablo. Yeah, Diablo 1's fine. Dude, Diablo 1
You
has
can
some
play
great
Diablo 2
lines.
though.
You don't remember the iconic fresh meat.
I've only played Diablo 1 once for like an hour for Let's Try, and I'm like, why am I? You can't run? Oh no.
Oh my god. Nothing is more funny than when you go up to a barrel and you're like, look at all these barrels, and you hit one and a skeleton pops up and you're like, uh-oh. Like, wait a second, I didn't want an encounter right now. Like,
Fine.
Why is
skeletons are
xylophone music
easy.
playing around this barrel?
yeah, it's like great. Like you're low on health and you're like, oh, I know there's gonna be food in here, and you hit it and a skeleton's like, hi. You're like, like, what are you doing in there?
No, in barrels? No.
You get health potions. So there would be
Yeah, you
health
get health
potions inside
potions.
of inside of the barrels. And so but sometimes there'd be skeletons, which you don't want when you're looking for health. You're not particularly like, yeah, I want to fight when I'm low on health. There was a lot of fun because it had that really dumb like limited field of view because it's such an early game. And so there's like these points where you could definitely walk off and or like wall, like basically hallways you can go down. You can go down a hallway and not realize that there's a lot of people coming after you because you just didn't turn the corner long enough to know how many people there are. So you would go down a corner and be like, oh, okay, I don't want to go that way. And you walk around, and then like just out of nowhere, you'd have like 3 people coming after you. And you're like, I didn't even know there's people in this room. I didn't go into it enough to even see them, but they know I'm there, and now they're coming after me. Diablo 1's a great experience. It's like now Diablo's so boring, but before it used to be such a threat. Like every moment of your life was a threat. Now you are a threat to everything.
I played the beta for Diablo 4, and I'm so disconnected from my experience back in the day when I played Diablo 2 ad infinitum. Like solo found, completely single player, no multiplayer whatsoever. And not following any meta builds whatsoever at all, ever.
Yeah.
And just figuring it out all by myself. Like that's not even what people were playing the game like back then, let alone how they were playing Diablo 3 or Diablo 4. So it's just like that experience doesn't
really exist anymore.
Doesn't exist. Yeah.
But Diablo 2 is my mother's favorite game until Resident Evil 4 came out. So I have like thousands of hours in Diablo 2. That's definitely one that could just like I could lose time into just because.
Caesar 3 came out as well, sorry.
I'm trying to I guess realistically I would probably end up having like a shit ton of retro games. I'm trying to remember now, and I think like
by definition,
Pac-Man, Centipede, well, no, I'm just saying like, yeah, by definition, but I meant like I meant to say arcade games. I would have like a lot of arcade games in there, because I played a lot of them growing up by force. Like that was what I was forced to play a lot, and so yeah, so like I think like that would probably be the majority of the games I would probably boot up with, would be those. Just because they're also very high replayability, like Galaga, Pac-Man, Centipede, Missile Command. Those are games that you can just keep playing over and over again for a pretty long period of time. It's kind of like how old people play solitaire. It's the same kind of concept. You're kind of just doing something that you feel comfortable with doing, but it's not actually taking a lot of your bandwidth to do it. Like you don't have to.
Yeah, it's like
invest
something to do with your hands.
Yeah. You're keeping your brain going, but you're not overworking it. Like you're tired, you're exhausted, you don't need to do that kind of work anymore. So you're gonna do something that's still fun, but isn't going to tax your like capacity to think. You're not gonna exhaust yourself by the time it's like lunchtime.
It's like top 500 players in Overwatch play.
No. Top 500 players are like wasting too much of their precious limited time on this.
No, I'm kidding. I'm
thinking.
Kidding.
Those are types of games that you can also, I think, are also what's the word? They're easy to bring other people into too. So if you're not alone in the world, at least you could be like, here, play this game. Let's go for high score. I guess there's like something to do with them. I don't know. I guess Pac-Man has a multiplayer option. You could just play 2 players in Pac-Man. But those are the types. I think, is there? mean, really, the fight will just be getting the stupid operating system to load anything fast enough for you to want to
Windows
play it before
98 with its
Yeah, I mean,
DOS
your attention
background.
span's probably the biggest threat to you because
Just booting it up takes forever.
Completely. People don't know what they have today. People are.
No, they don't.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've spent previous podcasts and like Overwatch stream times complaining about how frustrating Windows 11 has been for me lately. But like, we don't remember how good we have it now because like, you know, back in the day, Windows 98 had almost no bloatware on it by comparison and still took 6 minutes to start up while you waited for the computer to just load.
The downtime of old video games, not even that old of video games. Like I remember playing Oblivion on the 360 and 50% of my playthrough was just watching that progress bar slowly move and mostly sit still.
Well, it's weird because like nowadays people are like, load screens.
Really?
Easily half your time playing Oblivion is just fucking waiting for the game to load every time you open any door or go anywhere.
You must have had your computer must have been below
I said
the
360
recommended things.
No, no way.
On the console, right? Right. Yes.
You used to just wait for video games
PC experience
forever.
The PC experience on a 3-year-old computer at the time was like amazing. It was super fast. Everything was so fast.
Well, the thing too though is that like we've only been without loading screens, quote unquote, for like not even a generation. They still exist, of course, but like people will be like, bro, I had to wait 40 seconds to like respawn in a game. It's these loading screens are unbelievable, and it's like, dude, have you ever like saved a game on a PlayStation 1 JRPG? Because like making a save file in Final Fantasy 9 takes 45 seconds. Like, the screen isn't even on a progress bar. You're just sitting there hoping it didn't break.
Even without the actual act of saving taking time, the surrounding menus being so time consuming, even when I'm playing like an emulator on PC, make me not want to like. I genuinely do like mental like opportunity cost math in my head of like, is it worth stopping to save? I have to sit through. I have to click through like 6 menus to do it because it's like a Silent Hill game or something. Like, is it worth it? Is it worth? Or like
Silent
Hill
is a good example. You press the start button to pull up the menu, and there is like 5 seconds of black before the menu actually fades into the game. Like, you know, like people just like don't have the patience for that sort of thing because they're so used to things happening quickly. But it also, I mean, this gets into a kind of cool topic, which is just like the way we interact with games and like what we're used to has changed, but it like doesn't, it's like there's like a completely different pace of video gaming now, even with like slow, analytical, introspective art games nowadays. Like those experiences go by so much more quickly than they used to, and the way that we think about them and the amount of time we have to actually sit with them is drastically different than it used to be. Because you know, you just literally had to spend more time playing them because they were slower and had more downtime, and we used to really cherish that. Like that was like part of the atmosphere of a game, was like just how much time you had to literally spend in it. And nowadays, because there's so much coming out and because there's so little attention span, we're just trying to get through everything as quickly as possible, and in some cases that makes a game better. But
I think our lives are different, but it's not just about attention span. It's also the stories that the games told at the time. When I say stories, that's not what I mean. Like the place they occupied in our minds, at least in my experience, was very different because games were more newer and a newer medium, and the opposition of the new things that you could do in gaming in comparison to everywhere else, like in what you saw in movies or what you had in books or whatever. And so because of that, we were just okay with you know, spending a whole afternoon messing around with the file editor or map editor for StarCraft 2 and not do anything anyway. I mean, that still happens, but it's for specific games, and I think specific people even. In general, it's just games have to compete with themselves for like 20 years. They have to show something new these days, and that's what happens is they get more efficient at competing. Otherwise,
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely agree. I think you're onto something there where it's like, it's not even necessarily that games are like self-conscious of the ways they used to be. It's just like
That's a
there
good way
is
of putting it.
some degree of like efficiencies and stuff where it's like, okay, well, maybe we should avoid being like this or like taking more time than we need to because we can be more efficient and more masterful,
Yeah.
instead of just trying to forge some sort of new, forge our way forward in an industry that we know nothing about, in a medium that we know nothing about back then. But like, it's interesting. It's a trade-off. I've always said, people, I've harped on this. I think I talked about this in the Signalis spoiler cast, but like, I don't really believe in the idea of a game aging poorly. Like, I think good games back then are still good games now. Like, the thing, like, it's not like people back then were cavemen who had low standards and didn't just didn't know what was good. Like, Fallout 2 nowadays is still as good as Fallout 2 was back then. It's just you have to approach it in a different way, and a lot of people don't have that mode with which to approach it. I think that's more of an issue on the player side than it is on the game side. And that isn't to say that, like, yeah, some games are old and crusty, but like, it's interesting to look at now because, like, we're still, like, games nowadays still are paying homage and paying respects to stuff that was like done back then. And in a lot of ways, there are games from back then that, yeah, they're like covered in the crust and grime of time and modern efficiencies. They
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
they're still good.
From a
Yeah,
gameplay perspective,
just because a game doesn't have a specific feature like autosaves or something doesn't make the game trash. It's just like, it was different. They just didn't. That wasn't a core priority when they were making the game. Those are things that you have to, like, you just had to endure at that time period. But the quality of the game doesn't go down because it lacks this one distinct feature that they didn't invent for the next 20 years. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Like
the design of the game can still be good and interesting.
yeah, that's, the gameplay can, but I think the story of any game can age though. Like, I think I look at
we think about contexts, right? Like,
no, but well, I don't know. It's tricky though, because games in particular have done this thing for they stopped doing it more or less recently, where they just copy other mediums and pretend that it's brand new. Like, for example, a game that I enjoyed a lot, is it Godfather? What's the name of that Mafia? Mafia 1. Mafia 1 was just a rehash of movie tropes. And so many kids like me, when I played it, we saw that and we never saw the movies. And it was just like, oh, this game is, look at all this interesting dynamics. And it's just a rehash.
Yeah.
Like, and games kept pulling that off for decades. They did that since the 80s.
Completely.
And I think that ages though. That's the sort of stuff that stops working. And when you go back and you read, or I suppose the thing is, we're also going back and we're older, so it's difficult for us to look at something that when we were young, like, oh, this love story is so beautiful, and now we go back and it's just like, oh no, it's not. It's terrible, or whatever.
Yeah. I think with part of that, but there is something worth noting about that, which is like, you can still tell a story that's been told 1,000 times well. And like, of course, some games didn't, and we were just making do with what we had, and there was just a novelty of like, oh, this is the first thing to do this in a video game, and something like Mafia maybe struggles with that, just being the first sort of cinematic Mafia video game that ever existed that like managed to kind of do it right. But I do think, you can still say like, this wasn't that this wasn't a big deal isn't necessarily true, because there are still games from back then that were amazing back then that still do things better than games that are trying to do that same thing now.
100%.
And like, I think about JRPGs as an example. I'm not really trying to talk shit about JRPGs, but I think an industry conversation right now is that JRPGs currently are sort of a dying genre, in the same way that survival horror was in the mid 2000s. Because there aren't as many coming out, and they are not hitting their critical acclaim, and they're not being embraced by consumers nearly as much as they used to be. Panzer Dragoon Saga was way ahead of its time in 1998. It was an incredible game, and it does stuff that like modern JRPGs are still trying to find answers to, like on a game design perspective. They're like, how do we solve around random encounters and like making interesting battle systems? And it's like, that's a thing that Panzer Dragoon Saga did. Like it has those answers. It's just no one followed up on them. It never got internalized. So there's definitely still cool stuff to mine back then. Like just because it's old doesn't mean that it has been superseded. Because in a lot of ways, like a lot of retro games, that was a weird period of time for gaming where everyone was doing different things. There was no communication between developers. People were just forging into the unknown. And like, frankly, as a result of that, like a lot of really cool ahead of their time games got completely lost to time. They just didn't find an audience. And now because people are not going back to play those old games nearly as much, and they're not as accessible, and there's a million reasons for it, you know, there's still some actual hidden gems, like games that people could play and get a lot of enjoyment out of now, if they only were able to get over like the lack of an autosave or like the lack of of camera control on your right stick, you know, like,
or the game just
because the game doesn't have that doesn't mean it's not
3 times
useful.
as fast.
Yeah, no sprint to make you just like fly through the game world.
Just games where like every menu and every bit of movement and every bit of combat just needs to be happening faster. Like, oh my goodness.
But those games were bad back then as well. Not necessarily as a whole, but like for example, what's that game that has you had a Let's Play, Keith, like a Western sort of JRPG that has enormous.
I was literally just thinking about it because I was about to bring up about like talking about older games that are completely out of their time and how weird of an experience it is to play both Kodelka and Anachronox.
Anachronox, that's the one that was because at the time it was people complained about it. It's like going back and playing Gothic 1 and 2.
Oh yeah,
people complained about the control system back then of Gothic 1 and 2. Like even simpler stuff like Fallout 1 and 2, the sort of right click to change the cursor type.
Yeah,
back then people were complaining about that because it was just like you know it's not very intuitive, but it's the solution that they got to allow you to do stuff that other games couldn't do.
This is an amazing point, Colonel, because you just reminded me way back in the day. I think it was the first, maybe Medal of Honor. I could be wrong about this, but there was one of the first-person shooters ever to use dual stick controls, where you control your camera on your right stick and your movement on your left.
Like
and
that arcade game we played that only I was good at.
In reviews, it was torn apart. It was
not Medal of Honor.
This control, or it was Alien. It was Alien 3. That's what it was. And people were like, "This weird control scheme that's by default will never catch on. Go into the settings and change it." And nowadays, if you put someone into a legacy first-person shooter controls where you like it's tank controls and you're turning left and right by moving left and right, and then can only move forward and back. Like people are like, what is this? This feels like mud. Like people were objectively not correct back then. Like people had bad takes back then. That has also not changed. Like it is very possible to find a game that was either lauded or derided back then that definitely does not hold up and like was just a weird product of its context. But
I do,
that's a good point.
No, I think you're right. Maybe I am over. Definitely, I am over generalizing. But I do remember playing Medal of Honor on the PlayStation, and I had played shooters on PC, and I did not like the control scheme because it was tank controls. And it was like, oh, that's cute, but it works better on Tomb Raider. It's like part of the puzzle, and not as I'm trying to shoot this Nazi here.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, I think that you're right though in a lot of respects though. I guess is what I'm getting at, which is like, things of their time, people did view them through those lenses, right? And it's hard to divorce a game's legacy from what people were talking about contemporarily, because like a lot of these people aren't going back to look at these games and see what they're actually like in a modern context.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just enjoy very strange dead ends, like Kodelka having fully like mo-capped cutscenes
Oh, yeah.
performed by like stage performers that were genuinely giving their all in a PS1 game is a hilarious contrast, and that like cutscenes would not reach that level of quality until like the Xbox 360 era. Like we literally went several console generations without getting Kodoko level cutscenes ever again, almost exclusively, like because like they were genuinely like horribly performed all throughout like the entire time I was growing up. So it's finding a game that was like 10 years older than when I first saw what I felt like were good performances was just fucking surreal.
Yeah. Well,
and then
that was my experience with Panzer Dragoon Saga. Like that's a game that came out in 1998 that has it's a 4-disc long JRPG that has full voice acting and motion capture. And that's unbelievable.
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then like Anachronox is genuinely just a baffling evolutionary dead end strange game where it has those impossibly large environments for seemingly no reason that you have to fast forward through because it just takes so long to get around, but like it was this giant sprawling like walk around game that had JRPG turn-based combat, but then most of the story progression was triggered via like adventure game gameplay where you literally toggled into having like a adventure game clicky mouse to interact with the environment and use object on object to figure out how to like proceed with the story. It was just it's just an incredibly strange game. I love finding really weird shit like that just no one really talks about, but it's just like a very just odd product.
Same.
Like I think
I love that stuff
because I think a lot of people shy away from it at the time. Well, specifically in regards to Anachronox, like it's like the people who played the Psychonauts back then. So many people was like, it's not really my style. But those that did is like, oh, this is a really good stuff. This is a really good game. And I mean, Anachronox maybe not so much, but I grew up hearing people say, yeah, Anachronox is really good. You should try it. And then I looked at it and I was like, no, I shouldn't.
Yeah. I think we've all been through that.
Or I just think about how like Spec Ops The Line got beat to market by like 15 years by like Silent Bomber, the edgy JRPG version of Bomberman, where you're like a terrorist for the state essentially, and like the tutorial has you just following instructions like you always do in tutorials, but it fucking ends the tutorial with you like murdering women and children at the order of the state because you're following the tutorial, and it just fades to black with like fire and the screen going black and just like a baby crying and then being silenced in a fucking PS1 game that's basically a ripoff of Bomberman, and it's just fucking surreal. And it's like, oh wild. Yeah, you thought the white phosphorus scene was inventive. I grew up playing this bullshit.
Press F to pay.
That is,
but then it has a chess boss that fights you with chess. Because it was a PlayStation 1 game and it was still insane.